Hi, and welcome to this special event that we're having with in collaboration with OnlyPhysics. Joel is joining me today. Hi, Joel.
Hi, thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Absolutely. And this event is going to be a little bit well structured because we have had a whole bunch of questions coming in from you guys. So what we're going to be doing right now is unpacking a little bit about what who we are and what we're going to be doing today. We're going to deep dive into some key ideas, some concepts, some techniques. We're going to have a big section on debunking some myths and misconceptions that we've heard a lot from people around us. And then, of course, the crucial bit is the Q&A, where you guys have submitted a whole bunch of questions through our forums. As well as that, if there's anything that comes up in the live event that you want to ask, make sure you put it in the live chat and we can try to bring that question up. So without further ado, let's start unpacking. And first off, Joe, I'd love you to introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi, my name is Joel. I'm the founder of OnlyPhysics, a not-for-profit website that we're aiming to promote free STEM education. I'm currently on a gap year and I'll be heading off to Harvard next year. And in the meantime, I work for the University of Reading as a research assistant.
Amazing. And as many of you know, I'm Zubair, founder of ZNotes. I graduated from UCL in 2020 with a master's in mathematics. I've been working with the business school in Cambridge, and I'm also the host of the Tomato Timer. So let's start this off. And the first thing I want to start with, Joel, is this kind of very typical thing that most students think that is part of a study schedule or study plan. The all-nighter. So tell me a little bit about what's wrong with taking an all-nighter.
So the all-nighter is fundamentally wrong because it means you haven't managed your time well, and if you're trying to cram in 8 hours throughout the whole night, you're going to be, number one, really, really tired the next day when you have your exam,
Mhm.
and that's a worst case scenario. Number two, you're probably not going to remember hardly anything because you're trying to, just cram in as much information. And so it's just a massive concoction of probably the worst revision technique you can do, because you're trying to do a sprint finish when it's a marathon when it comes to revision. So what
Yeah.
about you? What do you think about the all-nighter?
Yeah, so absolutely. So first off, like you've obviously not been planning your time well because you've had to go to this position of taking an all-nighter. As you mentioned, you don't have that much energy during that time, especially if you haven't slept all day. You're trying to power through the night, and then the next morning when you should be full of energy to go into your exams, you won't be having that. And finally, like the cramming method or the technique is very poor. You're trying to remember bunch of pieces of paper, notes, textbooks, and everything like that. And it's all kind of like amalgamating and not really going in somewhere. So it's what I'd like to say is like there's a challenge in time, energy, and technique. And so as we go into this workshop, we're going to try to break that into those three principles. So to kick it off, let's talk about time. So Joel, tell me a little bit about how you manage your time to get to a position where you don't need to do an all-nighter.
So I think for me, it's all about. I guess the easiest one is you do your work first, and then
Hmm.
you have the relaxing. But what many people don't know is that the first 15 minutes of your day dictate the rest of your day. So one thing I really like doing is when I wake up, I don't go on my phone, although it's really difficult because you instantly want to check your social media,
Yeah.
WhatsApp, Snapchat, Instagram.
Mhm.
But that's the worst thing to do. So what I like to do is just have 15 minutes. Either I read a book about maybe productivity, or just anything to start getting me into that mindset where I'm opening myself up to learning something new.
Yeah.
And I guess it's more sustained effort, and I guess taking regular breaks and trying to just work in a sustained amount in a sustainable environment. And so therefore at the end of the day you can have your relaxation to avoid burnout. But yeah, I think that's the best way I handle my time. What about you?
Yeah, so actually, I'm gonna launch off of something you said, which is talking about breaks, and talk about a technique which I'm a big fan of, picked up in my kind of IGCSE years as well, which is a Pomodoro technique. It's all about balancing your focus with deliberate breaks. So The way it works is very simple. I'm sure many of you have heard it before, but to just kind of like reinforce it, it's 25 minutes of really, really focused work and taking a 5 minute break after every one of those 25 slots. Um, and the way it works in the kind of, it could be adjusted a little bit, but most times you do 4 pomodoros, so that's 2 hours worth of work, and sorry, an hour worth of work, and you then take a longer break. And so that really, really gives you a strong structure to go along with your day. So the reason why this technique is really good for me specifically was because it's often easy to kind of say that we're working for really, really long periods of time. We can say, oh, I'm going to do 6 hours or so. But actually we're not doing that much work. We're actually being distracted, or during the working time we might just get, be daydreaming or something like that. The point about the Pomodoro technique is pushing yourself during those 25 minutes. It's almost like a sprint. You don't see anything around you. You don't want to get up for getting water or going to the toilet. You just work, and then take the 5 minutes to really, really refresh and change your kind of scenery. Try to get out of that really deep work zone. So Pomodoro technique is one that I'm a big fan of, and I think provides a really good way of actually planning your time as well. Because now you can say, hey, if I want to study for this, I can put a Pomodoro on that, or 2 poms on this, or 3 poms for this task. Um, which then brings me on to my next bit, which is all about having a revision schedule, having a very, very direct plan with what the last few weeks of exam prep are going to look like for you. So Joe, what is kind of your angle on exam prep or revision schedule specifically?
Yeah, so I have multiple revision schedules. So what I do
Okay.
before I go to sleep, I have a to-do list for the next morning, because I feel like when I'm about
Mm.
to go to sleep, I have a lot of time. I can reflect on the day. How did the day go? What did I do wrong? Did I complete my goals? Just collect my thoughts and prepare myself for the next day. Because I think one of the
Mhm.
issues is when you wake up, it's really hard to start working if you don't know what you're going
Yeah.
to do. So
Yeah.
by having that, I already know as soon as I wake up what my actions are going to be, what my intentions are going to
Mhm.
be. But
Mhm.
then I also have some more long-term plans. So maybe if I'm revising for a specific paper, I have like, okay, by this day or this day, I want to have learned this, this, this. And so it helps me to, you know, ensure that I've got the short-term performance and the long-term performance.
Yeah.
And also when I reflect at the end of the day, I can see, okay, am I on track to meet those targets? And I
Yeah.
think that's the best way. What worked for you? What's helped
Yeah.
you?
That's really cool. I love the fact that you have a little bit more of the freedom of having a to-do list in the evening, and I think that's a big piece, right? Not knowing what to do. So many of us, yeah, we can easily carve out the time and say, hey, we're going to revise for this many hours. We're going to do it for morning. We're going to do this. We're going to sleep well. But then we get to our desk at 9 a.m. and be like, "Ah, I don't know what to do. I have all these different subjects that I could be approaching." So having a task list and having a plan to do what actually takes away that kind of um mind like requirement, that inertia that exists of starting. So if you can mitigate against that by having a plan, that's amazing. So mine was a little bit different. I didn't really do the evening kind of checklist, which is actually really, really powerful. My idea was mainly to have an overarching plan. So for example, I had a very distinctive past paper timetable that I was going to do for the last few weeks before my exam, and I had a very across my wall. These are kind of like this picture from many years ago now, but I had all these checklists, and I would be kind of continuously tracking myself, because it's easy to kind of be doing a task in a day, but it's also important to kind of zoom out and see everything. All right, so I've done this chapter or this topic. How does that affect me in the whole subject? How does that affect me in my 8 or 9 GCSE or 3 or 4 A-level subjects? And how does that affect me in my kind of long-term goals? So having a way to kind of deep dive into a specific task, but also zoom out and look at where you've got to in your kind of overall plan is really, really powerful. So big fan of checklists, big fan of to-do lists, and a big fan of having some sort of timetable to kind of reduce my brain power in the morning to think, "Ah, what do I do? Actually, I know what to do. I knew that last week. All I need to do is get started on it." So that closes us on revision schedules, and it takes us to the next kind of pillar that we want to discuss, which is all about energy. And this is something that I've started to discover the importance of much more of the past few, months and years. But sleep, it's such a crucial thing. So tell me why, Joe, for you, sleep is such an important part of, you know, day-to-day life, but also specifically in exam revision time.
Yeah, of course. I think sleep is one of the most underrated things when it comes to revision. A great piece of research I found out, which was that if you miss 2 hours of sleep below the time you're meant to be getting, so for
Mhm.
people in our age range, that would be 8 to 10 hours a night,
Mhm.
it will take you a whole week just to recuperate that loss of sleep. And I think it really goes
Yeah.
to show how the the whole like revision and studying, it's a massive marathon. Like I said before, it's, you don't want to sort of, I think in some people's minds there's this idea of doing all-nighters and just working really really hard, when there's been countless and countless studies that have shown that even working more than an 8 hour workday, 40-hour work week, beyond that, you waste your time. And I think
Yeah.
sleep is incredibly important. You want to relax. Another thing about sleep is that you really want to focus on ensuring that your sleep is at a right time. So you have like a regular sleeping pattern. So a lot of people stay up till 2, 3 a.m. and then wake up at 10 a.m., 11 a.m. You're still getting 8 hours of sleep, but it's not very high quality. So yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I've read about sleep. What about you? What have you heard?
Yeah. Also, very recently, I came across a study which says that it's actually during sleep that we form those deep neural connections between memories. So this may sound ridiculous, but actually, what I'm trying to say is that when you're going to sleep and you've studied really hard during the day, it's actually during your sleep where you're making those connections in your brain. So you're actually kind of working in your sleep as well, because our brain doesn't go to sleep, right? It's continuously on, and it's actually thinking back to the things that it's heard in the day, things it's read, and it's trying to like build those connections and strengthen them. So this was something that I've kind of been surprised with the study, but it makes a lot of sense, and it's so important to consider the kind of like these kind of aspects of there's a whole bunch that you're working on, especially if you're using the Pomodoro technique and working really really hard. You should actually be exhausted by the end of the day. You should feel that exhaustion, and tie it together with some physical activities. Your body should be like, "Oh, I need some sleep," and try to get, as you said, some really good quality sleep. And I think one thing that I've been using in the past few almost a year now actually is this app called Sleep Cycle, which monitors my sleep, and it kind of either through a microphone or some movement chips or whatever, it sees my kind of like when I'm awake, when I'm going into shallow sleep, when into deep sleep, and kind of monitor. So you can download that on your phone. What I do is I put it on, and the great thing about it is you can have a window. So for example, if you want to wake up at 9 a.m., between 8:30 to 9, it will look at your shallowest point of sleep and then wake you up. And the other thing that I think is important, you mentioned not picking up your phone in the morning. Really, really important point. It does absolutely set off your day. For example, if you looked at an annoying social media post, that can ruin your day. And I would like to kind of like mirror it back to the evening as well. Um, just before you go to bed, try to reduce the blue light exposure that you have. Put your phone away. Don't look at it for 30 minutes, 40 minutes. What I try to do is I leave my phone somewhere else and read on my Kindle. That kind of is a good point transition for me. So I have a few, half an hour to read and disconnect from the rest of the world and then go to sleep. Now I'm not touching my phone for about an hour then. So yeah, sleep is a critical thing. There's a whole bunch of research and readings out there for you to kind of learn more about this, but I would really, really recommend that. Um, I know how sleep deprived most students are. So please consider the importance of sleep. Which brings us to the next pillar. And this is all about technique. And I have a bit of a historical context to build here. Many of you have done the high jump. I'm sure you have, Joe.
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Um, and back in 1896, the only technique that in the Olympics people would go off to do was the scissor kick, and they would try to jump over the kind of the bar, and they got to a certain height. In 1968, this guy called Fosbury came along, and he did this ridiculous jump across the high jump bar, and he won the gold Olympic. He just kind of like broke every record there was out there, and everyone was like flabbergasted. How the hell did this guy come with no training? We never heard of him before, and now he's suddenly like the best kind of Olympian for high jump. And the thing is that he had a completely novel but effective technique. So they were incredible athletes, but just because they had the wrong technique, they weren't able to get to the maximum potential. Well, that's the analogy I want to bring. We might be have great quality sleep, have a lot of energy, have dedicated time, but if we're not doing the right things, if we're not applying the right techniques, we might not be making the most effective use of that time. And there are a couple of techniques we might kind of like just throw out there, because, and we'll hopefully might dive into it a little bit more on a Q&A, but one technique which I am a big fan of is active recall. And some people call it the blank paper technique. It's super simple, which is why I really love it. It's essentially you just literally take a sheet of paper, and without any prompts, you are supposed to recall whatever you know about a certain topic, chapter, process, whatever it is. And what it's forcing you to do, compared to something like, let's say, reading your notes, is that it's forcing your brain to work really, really hard. It's making it, it doesn't have any prompts. It doesn't have any, like, it's not even a past paper question, because a past paper question is also devolving some information to you, right? You kind of understand, oh, they're telling you a part of the process, or some sort of fact. Now you have no prompts. You just need to recall as many things as possible. Um, and it is a really good diagnostic tool as well. So you might say, okay, I'm going to sit down and try to write down as much as I know about electrolysis. You spend 5 to 10 minutes writing stuff down, and you're like, okay, nothing else. There's nothing else in my brain I know about this topic. And then you kind of go back and you look at your textbook or your notes or whatever, and you say, okay, I missed out, what electroplating, and I didn't know what that meant, or I didn't know this specific condition or technique or whatever. And now what you've done is you have a map of things which you know really, really well, which you can find out and remember unprompted. And you also have the areas which are a little bit weaker, or things that you can revise a little bit more. So having this kind of like technique is a really simple and very useful way, and it actually forces you to not go down this kind of route of simply just doing, writing notes or reading textbooks or something like that. It's really engaging your brain. Do you have any specific techniques, Joel, that you like to use as well?
So I really like using active recall, but I also do it. One thing I do, which is quite strange to some people, but I
Mm.
have a sheet of notes that I've written about a certain topic, using
Yeah.
a textbook or any revision material. And then I just walk around, I don't know, in my room or the garden, or if there's like a parent in the house, and I just try and teach what I've learned aloud without looking at the notes.
Hmm.
And you start off quite badly, you have to keep looking at your sheet, you have to keep referring to your notes, but eventually you explain it to the point where you can talk about it for hours on end without even having to refer to any notes. And that's what's really helped me, because it also helps you to I guess go away from the standard, just writing notes, which can get really
Hmm.
boring, and it's sort of refreshing your revision, and
Yeah.
it really helps. It helps me, and I don't know if you've used it or what other techniques you've
Yeah.
experimented with.
That's a really good one. Actually, it's sometimes referred to as a Feynman technique. It's about teaching back to others, and it's actually very similar to what I'm talking about. The blank paper is kind of like doing it on your own, but being able to walk around and talk about something. I definitely did that with a lot of my, especially in my last few years of math exams for university. I would walk around with these like 3 or 4 pages of proof that I had to remember, and I just try to explain it to this invisible crowd of listeners, and just walk around the garden, or in my room, and just try to talk through them. And every time I'd talk it through, I'd start to strengthen the statements between each of them, and it made such a big difference in the kind of in the final go, when I was like, oh, I remember that I was explaining it to this in this way, and then I'd suddenly remember it all. Um, Another one which is quite cool, and it's getting really popular these days, is spaced repetition, which is all about, there are some things which inevitably you need to memorize and remember. So spaced repetition is all about like making sure that you're actually trying to remember something every so often, so that it doesn't completely vanish. And tools like Anki, if you've heard of them before, are really cool tools which you can kind of like input some information or data or whatever facts you want to remember, and every so often it will say, okay, Zubair, you haven't looked at this fact in so long. Do you remember it? And so we kind of like start to recall stuff. Um, but I think that's it for techniques for now. We might dive in a little bit more in the Q&A. But Joel, take us through myths.
Yeah, so we're going to go through four of the probably biggest myths that we've heard, and just I guess, systematically debunk them. So,
Mm.
the first myth, which is I'm going to work 8 hours a day leading up to my exams and I'll be fine. This is something I hear a lot. A lot of
Mhm.
people, I mean, there might be in the Q&A as well, I haven't seen the questions, but they say, I've got 2 months until my exams. Do I have enough time to revise? Can I get an A star? Can I get X, Y, and Z? And I think the best way to answer this question is I always like to look at my revision as imagine if I was playing a sport.
Yeah.
If I haven't played the sport for 6 months, if I haven't gone running for 6 months, I can't just flat out run for 8 hours a day. I'm going to crash, and
Yeah.
that's the best way to look at it, in my opinion.
Hmm.
And I guess the you can obviously work for 8 hours a day. I've had times where I've had to revise for 8 to 16 hours a day if I've just preparing for the exams. I remember further maths or something like that. But that's because I've effectively trained myself up to get to
Yeah.
those points and increased my study stamina, almost as
Yeah.
if I guess an athlete improves their stamina and builds upon the distance. So I
Hmm.
think that's a massive misconception that I want to throw out there. That if you're relying on a massive, you know, spur of energy at the end, it won't happen. You're probably just gonna, I guess, burn out or get really worried. Am I doing enough? Am I working enough? Am I going to
Yeah.
fail? I guess, is there anything you can add on that, or
Yeah,
anything you think?
well, for me, it's like kind of building on something we talked about earlier, but there's a big piece about consistency, as you mentioned. You need to be building up along the year. But the other bit is that what that 8 hours is kind of irrelevant. It means it's not important about the number of hours that you've studied, but the quality of those hours. So something like applying the Pomodoro technique and working within these kind of 25 minutes intense slots, that can be crazy helpful. That can be crazy productive. But if you just sat down with 8 hours and also had your phone open and like kind of like your laptop on Facebook or whatever like that, you're suddenly like, is that the most effective 8 hours of your day or not? I guess what I'm trying to say is that make sure that try to be very kind of mindful about the time that you can spend. Make sure that it's like suitable and feasible for you. And second is that make sure those hours are spent in the most effective ways, even if it's fewer hours. But yeah, quality over quantity.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I agree. And this next myth is
Mm,
one that's sort of counterintuitive to this whole presentation, but I guess it
yeah.
acts as a bit of a disclaimer, saying that you know we're going through general tips and tricks, but there is no, I guess, formula. There's no golden rule.
Yeah.
There's loads of amazing techniques out there. Active
Hmm.
recall, saying out loud, mind maps, Cornell notes. But you have to experiment with loads of different techniques to find what's
Yeah.
best for you. Because for me, what works really well is just writing notes and speaking out loud. I can't use mind maps. For me, they don't help at all. But for someone, they might help a lot. For me,
Yeah.
colored notes, like really nice detailed notes with like colors, for me that doesn't help and it doesn't work. But I know some people can like they can link the knowledge with the colors and remember it that way. So I guess it's a bit of a disclaimer saying that you can't just follow what your friends are doing. If your friend got an A star, simply doing what he did won't guarantee success. But yeah, but there's just experiment with the different techniques and find what's best
Yeah.
for you. I guess, do you have anything that you want to
Yeah,
add to
just
that?
to build on that, like, we're all human beings. We have our own kind of experiences and insights and ways that we work best. It kind of goes back to the previous slide as well, number of hours you can study. Someone can be doing 8 to 10 hours a day and getting those A stars. Someone could be doing a couple hours and still getting the A star. We're all very different. We're all built differently. Our brains work differently. We have different levels of stamina. So it's one thing you could be doing is get inspired by these ideas. So me and Joel have talked a lot about our experiences and how it has worked for us. But this is just like a little bit of a kind of a exposure to the different things that you can be doing. So test yourself, experiment. And I know this might seem like it might not, like on the short term scale, it might not seem as important, but thinking about long term, when you're going into university, you need to have a very really good method of revising and studying that yourself very well, because that's the only way you're going to continue going, because different people have just different methods. um, But let's keep moving on, shall we, Joe?
Yeah, exactly. This next one is you need a tutor to do well or have really good teachers. I don't have those. Now, this is something that
Mm.
I really had to deal with because I went to, before my sixth form, I went to a really, really underperforming state school, one of the worst in
Mm.
the area. And, for some subjects, we didn't even have the right teachers. So we had, say, a
Yeah.
bio teacher teaching us physics. And so a lot of the time, a lot of people were saying this, I can't do well in my GCSEs. We don't have good teachers. But for me, it was a really big challenge to work independently.
Hmm.
And what I realized is that I was able to outperform people who went to grammar schools or who had private tutors simply because I realized that all that knowledge and information is out there. I think
Yeah.
it's, we have access to the internet. We don't have to go to a library, try find an old book on mathematics. We can literally just type up on Google. So this is a massive thing that I think stops a
Hmm.
lot of people from working hard because they feel like, oh, I can't succeed. I don't have a tutor. I've
Yeah.
been to. I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to a private school, and I can tell people that they're nothing really that amazing. Anything, if you go to a state school, you can outperform any private school student, and that's just something I really wanted to put out there, that you don't need to have a good environment. Obviously, teachers can
Yeah.
inspire you and they're really good, but uh, people have a lot of potential within them, and if you work
Absolutely.
independently, you can fulfill that. I guess, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I came from an international school, but I had that wide spectrum of some really great teachers, some teachers who I actually self-studied a bunch of subjects because I just didn't have the teachers for them, including like things like further math and stuff. Um, and it's I think to kind of like reiterate what you're talking about is about proactivity and taking kind of responsibility of your education journey, right? It's about um, saying that, hey, I may not have the best teacher for math, or I may not have the best teacher for X, Y, and Z, but I need to do well in this because this is what's going to determine my life. And because of that, you kind of just, you push through. And at the end of the day, we are in a world where there is access to not just one really good set of videos, but hundreds of sets of videos, and each one is slightly different. Someone might be more of a teaching like a lecture style, someone might be doing analogies, someone might be doing visuals or whatever, and you can go out there and find resources and information that can help you. It's all about taking responsibility, and I know it's hard. I absolutely um, can empathize with the different challenges that each of you might be facing. There may be financial challenges or socioeconomic backgrounds or geographical, whatever those are. Um, at the end of the day, you are going to have to live this life that you've been put into, and to succeed, you need to do well in these. Potentially, it might not be about these exams, but it can. And if it is an important part for you, then you need to find out a way to make it work. So I think taking responsibility is a big piece for me here.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it will really help you in the long run to become
Of
more
course,
independent
yeah,
and
yeah. It's a
perform.
great thing. It's like when you get to university, you can't really just go up to a lecturer and say, "Hey, you're pretty bad." So you kind of
Yeah,
have to deal with it anyway. So uh, school is a great point to kind of like get trained to be dealing with a wide variety of things that you get out there in the world.
yeah, 100%. And
Mm.
this last myth
Mm.
that we're going to go through is something that I'm pretty sure everyone, including myself, has used before. Is that I know the content, but I just make silly mistakes or have exam stress. This is a
Yeah.
really good scapegoat excuse because you can just. There are times where you do know the content well, but the whole point of exams, especially now when there's more and more kids who know the content like the back of their hand, is that a
Mhm.
lot of the exam boards test applications. So they put the information in a unique context, and that's why a lot of people make silly mistakes. So
Yeah.
I guess number one tip is to realize that no mistake is a silly mistake, and you made it for a reason. So what really helped me when I was preparing for admissions test for the US, where I had to pretty much get every single question right, was whenever I got a question wrong, I would look into, why is it that I got it wrong? What did I think? Did I get too cocky?
Mhm.
Did I overestimate how well I knew this content? And sometimes I had, exam stress because it can be very stressful. These exams, they are an indicator of your performance. It's like a whole 2 years worth of information and knowledge
Yeah.
and work in one single exam, which can be really daunting. But I guess as someone who used to have exam stress, there are definitely ways that you can combat it through just being more mindful, or dealing with any, I guess, having techniques. So for me, when I get really stressed during an exam, I find ways to just regain focus. I might just, I don't know, like look at like a rubber that I have on my desk, just something to escape from that panicked environment. And I guess that's the best advice as well, is that when you're more relaxed and more at ease, you can really do well in an exam. And I guess, what's your take on silly mistakes
Yeah.
and exam stress and things like
Yeah.
that?
So maybe from a different angle, one thing that helps a lot is actually going through the process so many times that actually you start to reduce the stress levels and skip those mistakes. Because one way I would say is, doing a whole bunch of past papers and trying to get really familiar with the pattern, so that when you go into the exams, you're actually like, okay, I've done this before. I've done so many of these papers, and I know how the formatting is, and I know how the questions are going to be asked, and etc. But a lot of people tend to do past papers in a very disengaged way. So they have the mark scheme open, the papers open, they're just like, yeah, copy pasting it, getting through. And now they've checked off like 10 papers, but have they really made the most of it? So there are two things that I'd love to kind of like share. And this is something I kind of messed up in my GCSEs to learn more in my A levels is, do your past papers in a timed and controlled fashion. That is a great way to induce some like kind of like focus and stress, but it actually helps you build against it as well. I would even go as far as to say that if you have an hour and a half, try to do the paper in less time. Assign yourself an hour 15 or hour 10, whatever it is that can kind of like make it a little bit harder. So now when you go into the exam, you're actually like, oh wow, I do these papers in 20 minutes less time. I'm definitely going to be able to do it in an hour and a half. And so do them timed. And then the second bit is kind of talking, kind of reiterating what you said, Joel, about um, pinpointing your mistakes. So another piece that we kind of do is like, yeah, we start marking our papers. Oh, we got most of it right, got these wrong. Okay, let's go to the next paper. No, those questions that you've got wrong are the best diagnostic ways. Like, it's just a great diagnostic tool to find out what you're weaker in. And those questions, and you start to just dissect and find out, why did you get that mistake? Is it a content issue? Is it a concept issue? Is it a procedural issue? Have you been kind of not doing the right method? Try to figure out what's wrong. And as you keep doing this, you kind of start building this kind of great. Um, you've basically been able to identify all the issues, the leaks, the holes that exist in your knowledge, and now you've filled them up as well, because you've gone in and really, really worked on that question hard to make sure that you figured it out. So that's one thing that I would think I think is really, really important, especially when we're working on things like IGCSEs and A levels, which are at the end of the day very, very similar and have a very similar format in terms of exams, and past papers can be really effective. Yeah.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. It's really important, I guess, to learn from mistakes, and that way you can do fewer past papers but get more out of them, and it's just revising more
Absolutely.
intelligently. Yeah.
Yeah. So for the next session or section of this workshop is an open Q&A, and I am really pleased to invite onto the stage, the virtual stage, Alwyn and Aishu. So good to have you guys. It'll be amazing if you guys could like just quickly introduce yourself. So Alwyn. Alwyn, can you hear us?
Yeah. Sorry, just lagged out there. I'm on my phone. Is that okay?
That's right.
That's okay. So
It'll be
it's
great
Q&A
if you can
session, yeah?
introduce yourself a little
Yeah, my name is Alwyn. I'm a AS level student now studying biology, chemistry, physics, and maths. And
bit.
so my end goal is to study medicine moving forward into higher education, such as university.
Amazing. And Aishu, good to have you.
Hey guys, I'm Aishwarya and I'm doing my first year of physics and maths at the University of Manchester, and I'm also the content lead at ZNotes.
Thank you both for joining us and for helping kind of support the facilitation that we have a whole bunch of questions to go through today. So maybe you can kind of like kick us off with a question, and me and Joe will kind of take it in turns to answer.
Okay, so we have a question from Laura on the live chat. So she's asking, how can you develop a schedule when it's already midway through the year?
Yeah, great question, and we're getting closer to exam time. Joel, do you want to kick this off?
I guess one thing is look at what you need to learn and the content, what's your weakness, and just focus on those, especially if you're getting closer and closer to exam season, or like we have to see a predicted test, your mocks, whatever. Just focus on your weaknesses and try and discover those, and I guess really work on those, because the strengths, if you just continue refine your strengths, you're really going to improve that much. I would say you're going to make and cover the most ground through working on your weaknesses. So I guess discover what those are, and then you can just bit by bit tackle them. I guess, what's your take on that?
Yeah, just to say that like it's never too late to build a schedule, even if it's like 2-3 weeks before the exam. You can still spend a couple days to just sketch out, a couple hours to sketch out, okay, I have this many hours, this many days left, I need to get these areas and topics and past papers done. I'm just going to kind of slot them across and make sure that for the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I have a very, very well structured idea of what we're doing, what I'm doing for the rest of the right before the exam, basically. I know it might feel like you're wasting time, especially when you think, oh, this is I have so little time anyway, but actually it can make a huge difference, because as we've kind of mentioned in the live, in the kind of the workshop bit, was that you then mitigate against the number of time that you spend. I wake up in the morning and like I don't know what to do, so try to just very rough, it doesn't have to be incredibly well designed or well timed or whatever. Just start to put together the tasks and the kind of like the achievements you want to have at the end of every week or day or whatever is easiest. So never too late.
Yep, I think so too. So we can have another question that goes on, where we are at right now is, how do you overcome demotivation and separate your grades from self-worth, just because we're so close to exams right now?
Yeah, that's a big piece, and it's an important topic to talk about. Like being emotionally and mentally stable, because it's a tough time. It affects us, and at the end of the day, I read a piece of kind of in an article or something like that, where that some of us are now going through more levels of stress than the most stressful jobs back in the 1950s. That's just how kind of how pressurized this environment of GCSE and A levels has become, because it's so linked to determining our futures. So again, counterintuitive to everything we've talked about, but remember that exams are one point in the stepping stone of your life, and there are different pathways you could take. And yes, it's important to do as well as possible, but there's some incredibly successful people who've gone on to do things without having great A levels and GCSEs. So put it into the kind of the larger, grander scale of things. I would also kind of recommend finding, as I think Joe mentioned, a couple of things about battling the stress. One thing that I do is run, and physical activities is a big part of me staying emotionally and mentally stable. So find ways that you can expel that kind of stressful energy and kind of keep yourself motivated and happy. And remember that as much as you can put yourself through this kind of phase of exams, do your best, and things will transpire in the best way possible for you.
Definitely, yeah. I think it's important for everyone to find their own way of dealing with the anxiety and things like that. Okay, so if we're going on motivation, then how do you make sure you're always motivated, you're always working towards your goal, and you don't lose interest?
Yeah, Joel, maybe you can add on that.
I think it randomly crashed, but I think in terms of demotivation, what really helps me is to have a clear reason why I'm doing something. Because obviously, if you don't have a reason why you want to get those good grades or why you want to become successful, maths or whatever subject, you won't be motivated. So I guess for me, that's really, really important. Whatever you do, just take some time out to discover why it is that you truly want to do it. Because if it's just because your parents are pushing you, or because you think, oh, that's what my teachers want, you won't have that sort of motivation. When it comes to things that we enjoy, so I don't know, watching Netflix or something, you have a reason why, because you really want to watch that show, see what happens next, etc. And the same thing applies to a vision. As soon as you understand why, you'll be able to, I guess, work harder, and you will be naturally motivated. So I think that's my number one tip for that.
Yeah. Connected to things that you feel are most important to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Pardon, sorry? Oh, sorry.
No, that's it. But it's really easy to, get into procrastinating on things and
Yeah.
not always keeping up on it, because it's easy to say that in theory, but it's very hard to do it.
Yeah.
So how do you keep yourself from procrastinating?
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. It's we're talking in a very like fictitious and great world right now. Obviously, we'll find times when we're not as motivated. I'm like, oh man, what if I just skip this day? That's where I would say that having a plan or a schedule helps, because inevitably you'll have a day where you don't feel like doing something. But if you have a schedule which is kind of dictating what you need to do, and you've kind of done it on a day where you're feeling energetic and feeling motivated, you've kind of figured out exactly um, what are the tasks that you want to achieve. You kind of have that ready, and it's like a fight against procrastination, because I need to go and check off those 2 3 tasks before I go to bed, and it keeps you motivated a little bit. I'm not sure if that works for everyone, but definitely on the days where I didn't feel like working too hard, it would be something that would keep me on the ball. Another point is to like have days where you just take rest, take a break, and if it is something that can add to your kind of overall kind of energetic and benefit in the end of the day. Like, for example, taking 1 day break means that you're going to have 6 more days of really, really effective productive days. That's much better than having 7 slightly days. So if it really isn't feeling like the right thing for you to do at that point, figure out ways that can make you re-energize and get you back on the ball in the coming days. So it's a little bit of I do need to say that, coming close to exam time, we might not have that flexibility. So it is right at the end of it, you kind of do need to be pushing a little bit harder. But that's some way what I would say about that, Joe.
Yeah, I agree. I think it ties in with the whole discipline and like reason why you want to do something. Often we procrastinate because we don't know why we want to do something, or we don't know what to do, or we're scared of what happens if we fail. I guess the best advice that I really like to have, and it's all about the mindset. So you're mindful of why you're doing something, and you're willing to fail, and you realize, okay, I might not do well in this test.
Yeah.
I might revise really hard and not actually get the top grade, but I'm going to do a lot better than if I just don't do anything. And once you get into that routine of like discipline and reason why you're doing something, then you naturally feel motivated. For me, I obviously procrastinate, but when I'm procrastinating, I feel really bad about it, so I can't, just carry on doing nothing. But like you said, have days where you intentionally rest. Otherwise, you'll burn out, and that's obviously not good at all. So, yeah, that's all I can add to that.
Yeah, definitely. It's important to keep yourself from burning out, and you have to be sustained throughout until the exams.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do you structure your day? And people have a lot of after school activities and stuff, but you need to keep everything in mind, and sometimes it just feels like going to school, you have after school activities, and then you need to study, and you still need to take time off.
Yeah. Joel, you're closer to school than me, so maybe you can kind of talk about like how you were managing your multiple extracurricular and even activities like running OnlyPhysics at the time as well.
Yeah, I guess the best thing is make every like second if you can, or every minute, as intentional as you can. So don't try and reduce free time, not as in not free time, try and reduce wasted time. In many cases, we actually waste a lot of time, I don't know, like in the mornings or in between activities. So for me, one of the good thing for OnlyPhysics was to reduce the amount of unnecessary meetings I had, because they take up a long time and they don't really add anything. So I guess the best advice for any school student I have is, I guess, write a list of all the activities that you do, and and try and prioritize which ones are most important and how much time am I willing to invest to it. And then once you remove that wasted time, you actually realize how much free time you have. I mean, we have 16 hours a day, so I think there's time to do everything as long as you're prioritizing it in your schedule. What do you think?
No, that makes a lot of sense. I was gonna go give an example, which is a little bit like out there, like, looking at Elon Musk and how he manages multiple companies. It's crazy what he's able to do. So
Yeah.
human beings are amazingly adaptive, and they're able to do so much. And there's no harm in like looking at these incredible inspirational figures to kind of to share insights into how we could be behaving as well. We like to. I think another challenge in general, from not even like in this kind of as students, but also as in the entrepreneurial space, is about everyone saying that they're busy. Being busy is a very good excuse as well. Actually, you have a whole bunch more time, and you need to find out where those, as you said, where those slots of time are going away. And if those extracurricular activities are accentuating or adding a lot of value to your day-to-day life, then it's so worthwhile doing. University applications, all those things can really benefit from those. And if it's sports, you're keeping yourself engaged, you're keeping yourself energized. So those things are all linking back to your, the final revision or whatever. They're all like interconnected. So feeling good, feeling happy, feeling energized are things which are contributing to your overall well-being, and it's important to keep them all involved, as you kind of like go through school and go through further on as well.
Yeah, I agree. One thing I'd like to add is that one thing that really helped me was the 80-20 rule. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Pretty principle.
It's where 80%, 80% of your output comes from 20% of your input. So you want to find that those 20% of activities that actually do most for you. So I guess, intentional revision, active revision, and then you can really get rid of the other 80%, and then you're still performing and you have just a lot more free time. So I think it's like you said, the excuse of being busy. You can feel busy, but you might be being busy about stuff that doesn't really matter at the end of the day. So yeah, I think that's a great way to find more free time.
Yeah, Aisha?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much to add here, honestly, because I've covered a lot.
Sure. But like, do you want to get to the next question?
Yeah, definitely. So the next question we can take from the chat. So what would be the best advice for students preparing for this exam, like this exam session in 2 weeks? How do you make sure the last stretch is worth it?
Yeah. I can talk a little bit about this because it's a really critical time, and we can kind of like get away with all the kind of like the extra fluff and talk very directly about these 2 weeks. So by now you should have, hopefully have done a whole bunch of past papers, have some idea of what sort of questions you're going to be getting. You should also have some sort of summarized piece of revision resources, whether it's notes, whether it's flashcards or mind maps, whatever it is that works for you. So these last 2 weeks are really about making the biggest push, like making the biggest impact with the knowledge and information that you have. I would kind of do two things. One would be to make sure that in the content side of things, I've taken it from the canon, like everything that I need to know, and bringing it down slowly to things that I completely or I personally miss out most. So for example, like if there is a specific topic or a specific couple of bullet points in a specific chapter which I tend to forget, I should like make a note of it again. So you're going down this like filtration process of trying to take the content which is most important or most relevant to you, or that you keep missing, to have in a very, very accessible way. So I would do that as one kind of way to make sure the content is there. And the other thing is to go through past papers that you've done earlier and try and find the kind of the challenges that, again, use it as a diagnostic tool, figure out where your kind of gaps in knowledge are and try to fix those. Because the rest of the 80, 70, 60% of the paper that you've got right is great. So focus on that 30, 40%, which is, where you're messing up or you're slipping in a certain direction, because there is probably a very good reason why you're making a mistake there. So find that out, and in 2 weeks, you're able to do that. I would just say that, these 2 weeks are critical, and keep yourself focused on doing things which are most effective and can have the most impact. So focus on the things which you are, most worried or most weakest
I
about.
think that's quite important, because we tend to try and do the things we're already good at to make ourselves feel better.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's important to look at where we're not strong as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes I make like posters or sticky notes, and I just stick them all over my wall, so I'm always looking at it, and it's always within sight, and you keep getting reminded of it, basically.
Mm-hmm. So these last 2 weeks, good luck with those who are doing the major exams. But it's last push, it's last stretch. You guys can really, really do it if you can make sure that you are on top of, especially the weaker areas. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that we talked about to keep yourself happy and energetic during exams. So make sure you sleep well and eat well and do all this great stuff as well.
Because it's not just past papers and studying; it's also about yourself.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
you're the one writing the exam. And I think that past papers leads on to another question we have from the live chat. Is it the only effective way to revise for GCSE maths is to do past papers?
Joel, do you want to talk about this?
I would say very quickly, I'd say pretty much yes. I don't think, apart from doing questions for maths at E level, I don't think there is too much that you can do otherwise. You can do example questions and things like that, but I'd say it's just past papers for
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think with math, it's quite a practice-based subject.
Yeah.
Right, Alvin? So
so
you want to be doing that.
Yeah, I just did my GCSEs like last year. So what I found really useful was I did a load of past papers and I branched off into other exam boards. So I did the past papers on my exam boards, then went over to different exam boards and did past papers there, because I know the topics overlap quite a lot. And what I did then was I took hard questions from every paper and compiled them into like a question bank. And what I found was, closer to exams, I did this, question bank of hard questions, or like questions that I couldn't get the first time around. And then I just did them one by one until, I had them all down. Because I don't think there's any point, like if you know a topic really well, I don't think there's any point just doing questions from a topic that you know and you're confident in. But rather try to branch off into weaker areas.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. So past papers are probably most effective because it's a procedural based, exam. That's what it is. But at the same time, keeping yourself working on the questions which are hardest, rather than, just doing those, I don't know, I don't even remember anymore of IG math, but like, solving quadratic questions, quadratic equations. So those, if it's all about that, then, maybe you should do something a little bit different. I want to go back a little bit, Aisha, if you allow me to kind of like pick up some more questions from the chat, because we're going a little bit diving a bit into the subject. So there was one about physics as well. And I just want to make kind of like add a little bit to that. There's another question about economics as well. That's why it's all linked together. So with physics, another more procedural subject, it's important to, be definitely trying to solve as many questions as possible. But there's a whole bunch of kind of formulas and concepts you need to have really well grounded. Actually, you can attest to that. You're a physics graduate, physics student. But maybe you can add a little bit more to that.
I mean, for A-level physics, I know I had, like, especially for medical physics, we had all of these just tips on how MRIs work and how CTs work and all of that. So I just made a list and I put it in my notebook. And every time, for the first few times when I was answering a question, I wouldn't remember them. So I'd just keep looking at it and keep writing based on my notes.
Yeah.
And once you write it enough times, you have it in your head. And make a formula sheet yourself. I know there are a lot of formula sheets online, but it always helps to do it yourself.
Yeah. There's even like some aspects of it is like, formula sheets that are most important for you, the formulas that you tend to forget. So make it personalized. And sometimes if you are strong enough to derive some of the equations, go for that. If you can figure out, I can't remember anymore, some of the electromagnetic equations, then just use the ones which and just keep the rest of them. Okay, when I get to there, I'll actually figure it out myself because I can substitute this with this. So less to remember, more to kind of work on. I want to go on, Joel is back as well, but I want to go on to the next question, which is a bit kind of like trying to linking together that we've talked about math. Physics is like a little bit further away from that spectrum of very procedural, and the other side is very content-based. So talking about more content-based subjects like economics and business studies, I can say that I did a couple of them, bio is one of them as well. To remember, at the end of the day, you need to remember content. You need to memorize and be able to recall those facts. And having that filtration system is really effective. Going from the really from the textbook to the notes to only the points which are most important to you and most like things that you forget. That process itself is a little bit of like kind of trying to filter down and make sure that the content that you keep messing up is okay. The other thing that we've talked a little bit about is Anki. And spaced repetition through that. So you could build flashcards on Anki, and they can remind you about, hey, you haven't looked at this card for so many weeks, so you need to revise this, and they'll keep you on the ball with making sure you know the facts. I don't know if any of you guys have anything to add about more content-based subjects.
Yeah, no, it comes back down to one of the points we were discussing earlier about active recall and spaced repetition, which was mentioned in the presentation that you delivered. And for heavy like content-based subjects, that's like I do biology myself right now, and I know there's a lot of learning in that. And I think the best thing to do is just either condense your notes in such a way that it's easy to memorize. So that's bullet points, flashcards. A good technique that I found was you'd take the specification and you'd list the bullet point on one side of the flashcard, and then you'd have the answer on the other side, and you do that on every single bullet point in the specification.
Yeah.
And that way you can just check them off and you've covered everything.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. Should we bring any more questions from the
I think there's one for last minute biology prep.
Yeah. So
since we're talking about biology anyway.
Of course. So again, it's kind of very similar, flashcards, spaced repetition methods. I feel like I've said this quite a few times now, but keep going down this process of trying to make sure that the things that you're most weakest about are things that you're revising most, because at the end of the day, that's where you can have some pitfalls. So make sure about that. Anything else from you guys though?
For biology specifically, I used to have a page at the end of my notebook for each chapter, where when I do a past paper and I know that I get specific topics wrong, or I would always mess up and I'd always forget, I'd have that information at the end of my notebook. So I just had 10 pages of everything that I would always forget, some things that sometimes you learn new things while doing papers,
Yeah.
You find new information, new links, and I would put that on there. So before my tests and exams, I would always flip through just those 10 pages.
Cool. Do you want to have any questions we should bring from the chat or from our previous bank?
I think how to study for a subject that you absolutely hate. I think it's a bit hard to do that sometimes. It's not easy to study for it.
I guess you got to just push through it. I mean, if you don't like it, you've got to question why you picked it in the first place, unless it's a compulsory subject. But you've probably got to have an end goal in mind. If it's a compulsory subject that you need, like it's English, and you don't like English, think about what it is you want to do in the future, and it's got to be done. It's just one of those things.
I think
you've got to live with. Yeah.
the earlier you finish it as well as the faster you get rid of it.
Yeah.
Sure. Good ideas, guys. Shall we? What's up with the next question, Naishu?
Okay, so Ben's asked, should I focus on revision on subjects that you care about or subjects that aren't your strong point, which we were actually talking about before?
Yeah, it's a good point. Actually, I struggled with this during my IGs because I'm a very kind of like person who likes to be very consistent. So I was like, I'm going to spend the exact same amount of time on all my subjects, and yet there were subjects which needed more of my attention than not. And after getting through that process, I realized that that is something I need to be careful about. It's especially with subjects that, this links to like whether you hate it or not. If there are subjects which you're confident and feel excited about in general, you're generally going to feel a bit better to go into them, do the exams. So
and you'll do them anyway. You won't need to put as
exactly,
much effort into doing
yeah.
them. So
So
it's better to
I
put
would
your
actually,
active effort.
yeah. So exactly, I would actually interleave it. So I would. This might sound ridiculous, but like math was always something which I obviously went on to study at uni because I loved that so much. So I'd always like interleave it. So I'd have a day where, I'd have something like economics paper or something. I can't remember, but it was like an essay based paper that I had to do for GCSEs. And I really did not like that. But I knew I had to do as many of those things to kind of get into the rhythm of it. But on the day that I had to do two papers, one of the papers I would choose would be like this hard, really long essay based economics paper. And the other one I'd do would be a math kind of like paper two or something, because it kind of
Yes.
made me feel a bit better. It was easier. It made me kind of feel good. So yes, it's actually good to have these kind of like affiliations to different subjects and papers. So maybe you could use that as a method to like semi-reward yourself and keep yourself like buoyant and happy when you're revising. I don't know. That was what I did for myself.
I did that as well.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. I think now that we're talking about exams a lot, it's good to look at the big picture of things, So
Mhm.
about university, getting into careers and things like that. We have a question that's asking, besides aiming for good grades, how can we prepare
Yeah,
ourselves to go into university?
that's a good question. So it's kind of getting into like kind of uni applications and everything like that. It's a combination, obviously, of um, at the end of the day, exam grades do determine a lot, and they're kind of like a method that unis use to kind of like right at the get-go kind of like filter people out. So unfortunately, we do need to hit some minimum grades. We need to get some passing grades for certain subjects. Otherwise, a university will not even consider us. But then the next bit, it might be even harder. After you get those kind of grades which fit the threshold, you are then against a whole bunch of people who are all having those grades. So now they need to pick why you, and that's where it comes. That's where kind of everything else comes into play. Extracurricular activities, other initiatives or projects that you've been engaged with, other things that you're most excited about, sports, whatever it is, and it's kind of like seeing how that kind of holistic human being comes together. So might be going a bit far off, but talking about personal statements, when you're sharing your overall self, you should be telling the story of yourself rather than just listing a bunch of achievements and accolades. You should be saying, all right, this is where I started off, and these are the kind of things I've looked into, understood, and researched, and this is what makes me most effective for your, or most appropriate for your university placement. So really kind of go back to the roots and make sure that it's a very personal story, and don't try to copy that kind of like, ever since I was a 3-year-old, I wanted to be
Yeah,
an aerospace engineer or something like that.
because I think
Yeah.
admissions officers have seen enough of the.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, no, that was really good advice, because it's a journey that I'm on myself right now at the moment, crafting my first draft of the personal statement and everything. And so take my advice as you will, but I think it's a good idea to always have the course that you want to do in mind. So like if you're trying to put yourself out there as much as you can, so try and do extracurriculars where possible. Try and email that like one professor or one expert in that field about a question you've always wanted to know. And then because it's always something that you can discuss either in an interview or on your personal statement. So I think it's important to put yourself out there as much as you can. Try to be in a position where you have so much to talk about that the 4,000 character limit of a personal statement actually becomes restrictive. Because so
Great
try
point,
and do as
Ollie.
much as you can. And it might be hard that currently with COVID and everything, but I still think that, with the virtual experiences, there's a lot you can do right now.
Of course.
Yep, I think it's about building yourself as a person and making sure that you are more than just grades.
Absolutely.
So, okay, some people have asked, we're talking about exams and preparation. So how do you keep, because exam nervousness and being very anxious about exams is a real thing, and some people just mess up on the actual exam even though you've prepared up to it for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So, how do you manage your time during exams? And
like the actual exam, during the exam, we've talked a lot about preparing for them. So I have a little bit of a weird thing to share for this one, because for me, a big, like, going into exams, I had to feel super, super comfortable in the situation I was in. So going into the exams, I had to feel like I was doing, I had to go into this mode of, I don't know how to explain it, but like as if I was doing like a worksheet or some sort of like past paper at home. So just like to feel very comfortable and confident. And to do so, I'd go in, like really like, I don't know if I was doing breathing exercise, but I just like really, really feel relaxed in my table and everything. I'd even take my shoes off a little bit, like, or like just like slip them off a little bit. I'd roll up my sleeves. I'd be like feeling very like energetic, and start to think about the good stuff. Maybe like a song was playing in my head or whatever it was. But it was all these kind of things where filtering in, and I try to put myself in a state of mind where I felt, okay, I need to do well in this exam. But at the end of the day, I've been preparing for so long. I've looked at so many past papers, and I just need to do as best. I have an hour and a half or 2 hours, or whatever time. I had 3-hour exams for further math, which is a bloody nightmare. But I need to like really, really like these are the couple of hours that I can like show off my hardest, essentially. So that's what I did, kind of like I would kind of like really put myself in the mindset of feeling comfortable in the place, and have the kind of the end goal that these hours are so critical for people to like know everything as much as possible. So like do my best as much. I'd also kind of like talk about time management techniques within exams. I think that's very specific to the different exams that there are. I mentioned that try doing some exams in less time than normal.
I think that's very important.
Do really well. But even within certain exams, you should, I can't go into specifics, but some like literature exams, you need to be sure about, whether you needed to spend 25 minutes or 30 minutes or whatever. And I would always have my watch with me to make sure I knew exactly how much time I'd spent on a certain question. So those things all kind of add to your kind of seated exam time.
Yeah, I think making sure that you have done enough papers in a controlled manner it makes it easier going into the final exam, because you've already done this in your head before.
Yeah.
We used to do our mock exams in the same hall in the same way as our finals as well. So that really helped, because we'd already done the exact same thing like a month before. So it was just one more time.
So one of the things I just like to add to that is it actually leads on to one of the myths that was debunked, and it was about, making stupid mistakes. And I think that's largely down to stress in a way, because I know when I do a test and I open the first page and it's a question that I can't do, I usually leave it to the end. But I know that when I'm going on to the next questions, that question's in the back of my mind. And I try to do the rest of the paper as rushed and as quickly as I can so I can go back to the first one. And overall, the stress just builds up. And looking at the flip side of that, if you open up the first page and the first question's a good one and you like it, and so is the next one, you're slowly building confidence, and that accumulates. So overall, at the end of the test, you feel really happy. So it's important that you take a breath, calm down, answer every question in a structured manner, so that you're in a position that as you go through the paper, you're progressively getting more and more confident, and feeling capable of actually answering every question on the test. And I think that's a key skill to learn, to pick up.
Yeah,
Great
I think
point.
when I used to do my exams, I would always take a breath before starting, like you said,
Yeah.
just keep yourself calm. And I would always flip through the whole exam before I started anything, just so there were no surprises. I knew what was there for the whole exam. And if there was something I didn't know, I would start thinking about it at the beginning while I'm doing the first question.
Yeah. Great strategies. And I think, but like, just to remind people that these are things that we've tried and tested and it works for us, but for some people it doesn't. So I don't like flipping through the whole paper. I really like going through it one by one and just like attacking it from the get-go, because if I see, that's just me. But yeah, just to remind people that you could have different strategies for and it works. At the end of the day, what works best for you is most important. It doesn't matter whether it works for the rest of the 6.99 billion rest of people out there or something like that.
Yeah, definitely.
Any other questions, Aishu, or should we start to wrap up?
I think we've covered a lot of things. Some people have asked like specific questions. How do you prepare for practicals without being at the lab? I don't think me or Zubair are qualified to answer that question. I think Alwyn, if you have any inputs.
And honestly, no, because I'm in that situation myself right now. And what my teacher's basically doing is stripping away any practical questions, because it's unfair that, you can't really prepare for practicals if you've never done an experiment due to COVID. So
and these are some like challenges I never had to face, and I feel like I sympathize with you guys for feeling them. So I think there are a couple of questions that are some really great questions, but very specific to certain subjects or areas. And I just invite everyone to join our Discord server to have a kind of discuss these more in depth with some of the students who are actually studying this subject as well. I'd also kind of ask you guys who are live right now to take a few minutes to have a look at our feedback form, because it's been great to kind of do this session, but we'd love to learn about how we can make it more effective. If you have a chance, that would be amazing. And I would like to thank Aishu and Alwyn for facilitating. Thank you so much for going through a whole bunch of questions to make this session happen.
Thank you for having us on.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And finally, thank you to everyone who's joined in live. You've taken some time out of your day to talk to us, and we really appreciate that. But that's all for today's Acing Your Exams session with ZNotes and OnlyPhysics. And we hope to see you guys super soon.
Bye-bye.
See you guys.
See you.